Welcome to Daily Cyber episode 299. Today's guest I'm going to have on today is going to be Will Baxter. We're going to talk about a lot of great stuff about cybersecurity, what's going on in the industry, things along that line. Hopefully, you guys are having a great week. Everything's going on. It's kind of crazy with the industry, how it's changing. Everything's going on with AI. So I love to have great guests on like this to be able to talk about what's going on with cybersecurity, some questions that you guys may have, some questions I may have, and just kind of go through the day in, day out of what's really the truth about cybersecurity. Because I think the biggest thing I'm seeing more and more is the evolution of with AI technologies, the attacks and threat vectors and things that are happening, it's expanding. I was talking to a colleague 2 weeks ago, and they said they've gone from the claims going through of 40 claims per week up to 400. So the incidents are just increasing, right? So we really need to look at how we can protect ourselves, and we talk to experts like Will and just figure out better ways of doing it. So today I'm going to have Will Baxter on, works at the intersection of threat intelligence, cyber defense, helping organizations understand adversary behavior through infrastructure level intelligence, actionable telemetry that drives proactive defense. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, and let's hack at it. Welcome, Will.
Thank you for having me, Brandon.
Oh, thank you. How's your week been so far?
It's busy. These days seem increasingly busy. You mentioned the pace picking up, but it's exciting too. Tons of opportunity at the same time. So exciting and busy is how I'd put it.
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I love to hear your side of the fence. I'm just seeing our work getting busier. Like there's a day to day and like threat actors and incidents that are happening, events. But now I see it's 10x, 20x, where there's so much going on, where companies are getting compromised and or attacked at multiple vectors, using new technologies, seeing different vulnerabilities, doing a lot more threat intelligence at the tips of their fingers. So I don't know, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think things are proliferating. I mean, you mentioned 40 incidents to 400. That's a 100x increase there in incidents, and so there's a couple of things when you think about the indicators of compromise and looking at breaches, and after the fact, teams have to start pivoting and looking at the infrastructure that the adversaries are using to attack from.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, you start to see attacks against another organization or another entity, and you can quickly see them pivot across and copycat. And so by watching the adversaries, you've got some ability to see what's happening on the forefront. But if you're kind of just trying to stay in your bubble and defend, it is very, very difficult to keep up because you're kind of just playing whack-a-mole.
Oh, and I think one thing that most people don't understand is threat actors don't have any limitations.
Right.
Organizations, public, private companies have budgets, financial resources, teams, these limitations of implementation. Threat actors have their own business, right? Their own company, organization, groups that they work with, but they don't have any limitation of, hold on, we have to get approval. We have to go to the board of directors. We have to see if we have the right budget. They just go. Whatever technology solution, whatever they do, and whatever groups they work with. So sometimes when we look at the security side, I always say sometimes we're looking at with one hand, we're defending with one hand tied behind our back, trying to defend a group of people trying to fight us.
Yeah, and it's not only that the adversaries are attacking, but your existing infrastructure is atrophying under your feet. So every month there's new vulnerabilities, and as we know now, as you mentioned already, with AI, the ability to discover those new vulnerabilities that we don't know are already sitting there, that exposure exists already. Right. And so to your point, we're both defending against atrophying infrastructure that we're all trying to maintain and defend at the same time it's being attacked. And they don't have that, right? They're not worried about their vulnerable infrastructure. in the same ways that the defenders are. So the defenders are fighting multiple battles on multiple fronts.
Right. Now, thing that you brought up, let's kind of look at some of the questions I have. For the threat intelligence, how's that evolved, especially when you're looking at, the indicators of compromises and the things that you're looking at in different feeds? How's that evolving?
Yeah. So, when you think about an indicator of compromise, the last word there is compromise. So that's taking some pattern, indicator, IP, domain, hash, something like that, that has existed or been identified somewhere else. And then you're taking that and applying it and either hoping to use that as a method to block or a method to prevent or a method to identify. The problem is that's after the breach has likely occurred, right? And so the case is most of the times when we think about indicators of compromise, we're already reactive in nature and we're chasing yesterday's breach. Ideally, we want to get in front of that, right? And so how do we start to move to indicators of attack, indicators of attacker infrastructure that start to give us an idea of where do they set up their homes? Where do they set up their bases, right? Where do they launch attacks from? And where do they set up their lures? Right. Obviously, they're going to phish our users. They're going to, work around the edges. And we all know that the edges are no longer just castle walls. They're ephemeral. They're in the cloud. And we have distributed walls. And so the attackers are looking at those and they're probing those without regard and without limit, as you already said. And so identifying where they're coming from, kind of watching over the walls. The greatest analogy I have is if you've got a Ring camera, if you know anybody that's got the annoying Ring camera that rings like in their phone, they got a Ring on their thing. They've got the neighborhood app, right? And the ability to understand what's happening to those around us and where the attackers are targeting and the types of techniques they're using right now to break into cars in your neighborhood, that's super helpful intelligence that you often don't even think about as threat intelligence. But it's the same concept, right? You understand their TTPs and how they're targeting.
Right. And I think the one thing to add to your point is when you look at your attack surface, it's no longer just your environment. You've got downstream liability if you have third parties that are connected to your environment or have access to your environment. So it's no longer this, it's my company, I'm protected, I'm doing the right things. We're seeing it how it's expanding. I'm seeing this with due diligence and compliance, and you look at cybersecurity insurance, are all now looking at, okay, hold on, third-party due diligence, who else connects to your environment, who else has access to your data, your network, whatever that may be. So I think when you're talking about indicators of compromise or attack, you also have to broaden your horizon of, hold on, who else is connecting to our environment? Clients, partners, vendors, our support team. What does that look like?
Yeah, certainly. And I think to your point, like the big folks have the ability to defend themselves. They have pretty good exposure management capabilities at this point in where we are in maturity. But the suppliers, the small folks, the partners, the development shops that write code for us, those sorts of things, they don't, right? And they don't have the budgets for it. They don't have the same technologies. They don't have the same tools. And so it's a much softer attack surface for the adversaries to get through somebody else. And a lot of times you may just be a target of opportunity. Right. They're looking for those all the time as a pivot point. And then if you happen to work with that organization, there's an access.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's what I'm seeing myself. I don't know about yourself, but when you look at phishing campaigns and things along that line, you're starting to see more and more organizations get compromised by those type of attacks because they're low technology implementation. You're not compromising a firewall. You're not doing it. They're just spraying, an email campaign and seeing who clicks on it and who does that. Hey, you received my invoice. He did that. Now, don't get me wrong. There's other attack vectors where they've gone to the organization, they've compromised an individual. Now they send the email to that third party, and it's John Doe from Microsoft.com. Great. Yeah, I always get emails from Microsoft. So valid. I'm going to click on it, and then boom, you're hit.
No, absolutely. The probability rate doesn't have to be very high, and the sophistication doesn't have to be high because, to your point, it doesn't cost a lot in terms of resources to do that. Right. And so, yeah, absolutely.
So in that, if I was an owner of a company, looking at this right now, you're talking about indicators of compromise, threat intelligence. What do I need to do? Like, what are some steps I need to take right now if I walked away with like 3 things you would recommend I do?
Yeah, well, the first thing I think is getting an understanding of what technologies or what sort of data is available to you externally. It really depends on your maturity level. So, if I'm the owner of a business, the first thing I'd want to do is double check my insurance policies.
Right.
It's ironic, but I think most folks don't understand the power and some of the capabilities that most of the insurance companies these days have.
Right.
At Team Company, we work with a lot of different insurance companies, and one of the things that they are able to do is provide that proactive understanding for their customers that don't have the resources directly. It benefits them just as much as it does the insured to understand where those weaknesses are and what the attackers are doing against those. Really, those end up being your supply chain. Those
Right.
small folks that don't have the resources, they don't have a security team. So if you fall in that bucket, there are resources available at an insurance level. And so I had a good friend that owned a construction company. He said the same thing. He called me up and said, "Oh my gosh, my team is getting eaten alive with these invoices getting sent to my clients." It was a legitimate problem. And there aren't a lot of resources as a business owner if you don't have a security team. So I'd say that's step one. And then beyond that, really working with a good partner to begin to provide those services, that visibility that you need, and that external threat intelligence. So there's a level of maturity to where you go from being that consumer of threat intelligence and helping you make decisions and being able to provide actionable strategy for you as a business owner, up to getting those partnerships to where you're eventually able to use and action that intelligence yourself. It really depends on the level of maturity of the business as to whether you can action the threat intelligence.
Right. So insurance, totally agree with you. And now one thing I'm going to put a caveat there. You didn't say this is me. If you get a recommendation from your insurance broker or your company, do it. Follow through there because they're seeing these attacks time and time again. I worked with an IR company and we work with carrier, breach coaches, things along that line. And they're seeing hundreds of incidents. So when they say you should get this, go start investigating, start going through the due diligence, putting on that roadmap and going through, because they're not telling you because it's something that's going to cost and whatever, and it's going to, help you with your insurance. They don't want you to go through an incident because they don't want to go through that with you. Right. So they don't want to go through the claim. They don't want to do a ransomware event. They don't want to go to the restoration or forensics team. They don't want to do that. So they're giving you proactive advice to start to implement. So I'll throw that in on my kind of standpoint. The other thing is, one thing you said too is the threat intelligence. Is there anything that companies could use to get threat intelligence? And I mean information, knowledge about their industry, their company, their technology, that they can start being a little bit more proactive themselves?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the things that Team Cumry provides is threat intelligence. We call it Dragon News Bites, but it's really free intelligence that we release daily, curated. It comes from all sorts of sources across the internet that sort to give you information around the types of threats that are happening, whether it be ransomware events. You mentioned some of the service desk attacks that we've seen, whether it be through some of the threat actor groups like the COM or Scattered Spider, or your more sophisticated nation state actors, all the way down to your DPRK and IT worker fraud. If I'm a supply chain entity, that's one of those use cases that I'd be very concerned about.
Okay, which is good.
That's one free resource available to folks. If that's kind of what you're thinking, Brandon.
Well, just again, I think what now there's just information overload, right? Like, where do I go? Do I go to CrowdStrike? Do I go to there? Do I do this? And now I've got all these feeds coming through. Like, what do I do? And how do I take it in? And how do I take action? Because 15 different, feeds, information, technologies telling me to do all these things. And there's a list of 100 things I need to do. I don't have the budget, the time, the resources. I can't put all that in my roadmap. I think like having someone like yourself, myself, expertise to narrow that down, really understand, like you said, the indicators of compromise, the potential threats, and then kind of prioritize it. Like, what would you be like if I was coming to you, company ABC, and I said, okay, I've got these 15 feeds. I'm looking at that. I've got 100 things they tell me I need to do. Will, what should I do? Like, what should I start with?
Yeah, no, you're really talking about feed curation. And one of the things that folks need to do when they think about the application of those feeds is ultimately what are they doing with it downstream? Whether it's 100 feeds that you're aggregating, or I'd arguably say maybe one of the world's best feeds with Team Cumry,
Right.
Depending on the types of feeds, it really comes down to what you're applying that feed data to. So if it's an EDR, an endpoint detection response platform that you're needing to apply a block list, a lot of those have a limitation. To your point, you can't send 100,000 indicators to a block list and have it be effective. The other big challenge, you mentioned the indicators are compromised. Those are very ephemeral, meaning they change day by day.
Right.
So you really can't have the static block lists of old are not very effective when there's 8 million ephemeral residential proxies all targeting and attempting to log in, and especially when they're driven by AI. So the agents kind of don't give up. They can iterate and they can continue. So I think being able to get that sort of visibility is super critical to being able to pull that visibility together.
Okay. Now I know one of the things I was thinking about is operational intelligence, right?
Yeah.
At a machine speed, actual looks like what does that look like when you're looking at the implementation side, right, of all of this?
Yeah, well, going back to the specific use cases, we talked about EDR, but it could be SIM, like depending on whether you're pulling all the data back to Splunk or whether you're using distributed SIM, maybe a Databricks or some sort of an abstract layer. Depending on where you're applying the enrichments and where you're looking to do really expose malicious behavior. So whether it's at your points of login, your SSL VPN endpoints, a lot of organizations that say, hey, if somebody gets in through the SSL VPN, they've got access to the kingdom. It really depends on the architecture. But looking at those specific use cases, prioritizing the threats that you're trying to block there and making sure that the feeds that you're ultimately getting address the particular use case that you're trying to solve. And that's one of the things that, with Team Cumry, for example, we do have a very broad set of categories of intelligence that you can consume against, whether it be malware controllers or bots and fraud, ransomware, or nation state attacks, DPRK. There's a lot of different categories, and depending on the types of threats, obviously you can't defend against everything at all times. Mm-hmm. So being able to prioritize the things that are targeting your industry, the TTPs that are targeting your industry, and then making sure that you have coverage, ample coverage and sufficient coverage across those use cases, that's really where I would start. And then from there, work your way back to curating a proper feed that delivers the right intelligence at the right time. Some of that will need to be hourly. Some of it might be daily. Some of it may be weekly. You don't need to pay for it all to be hourly. And it won't be effective hourly. So I think that's where really being specific about the use cases, and to your point, Brandon, getting help and advice where you need to about applying those use cases effectively and prioritizing them. Otherwise, you could leave the garage door open. You got all the windows locked, but the garage door's open, right? And you've sort of defeated the whole point.
Well, I think to your point too, the add-on, there's a point of tuning, right? Like you're getting all this data information. If say we're using SIM logs, you got to tune it down so you're actually being able to action the logs. It's not alert fatigue, because that's the other thing I find when I work with SIMs and with the customers. If they don't tune it properly, they start ignoring alerts. It's just too much to deal with, and or alerts get buried, right? Just because they have 5,000 critical alerts coming through. Well, which one do you action? Which one do you actually go and look through and investigate and to see if it's actually valid? You got to tune those down to what's relative to your environment and what you need to protect for. So totally agree with you. And I think working with the right team to do that and then provide something I add into it is reporting. Going through and analyzing the report and reviewing the report. Is that what you need? Go back and forth. Like I know I've worked with customers and I go through them and we go through weeks of evaluating the report. Is this what you need? This is what we're finding. Is this true? Is this not true? This seems like it's an actual, issue of concern. Is it a false positive? Is it a false negative? What are we looking at here? And then by the time you get to actually real data, now you can start actioning it.
I think that's one of the major benefits of AI. When you think about being able to apply and measure data, measure systems, and measure, obviously you can now measure the cost of tokens. How much does it cost to build something? You can get that relatively quickly. Similarly, with data, you can begin to measure, volume of data in, volume of data out, and you can really get specific with, to your point, the tuning. And really begin to measure in ways that previously would have taken some really smart Python ninja a lot of some weeks, in the back room trying to write some sort of dashboard that could give you the analytics that you need. So I think the ability to get analytics really, really quickly and make sure you're measuring and and effectively alerting on the right things, or maybe even more importantly, reducing that alert volume with higher quality enrichments at the source. So there's a number of ways to tackle it depending on where you're at in that maturity journey. But obviously, understand those use cases, how to prioritize and get the right intelligence is super fundamental.
Now, one thing I recommend, and people are listening to this, if you're using AI, you always need the human in the loop to validate it. I found some people, and I don't know if you've seen this, Will, AI, Claude, ChatGPT, doesn't matter which one you pick, there's hallucinations, there's some of the challenges. I find that if you're not prompting properly or not doing that, it can go off on a little bit of a scope creep. So you got to validate that data. So take the report, 100% agree with Will. These tools are out there to be more efficient and grab that data, but always get that human in the loop to validate, to go through and do your due diligence. Don't just blindly trust that that's valid data. Oh, great, we're good. Go back and do your due diligence, your double check. Because I found situations where we've gone and done another check, and we've compared like ChatGPT versus Claude, and all of a sudden ChatGPT is finding something, and you're like, but Claude said this was clean. Why, hold on, why is it not clean? And then vice versa, right?
Yeah. No, certainly. I mean, I like to think of it in terms of the scientific method, right? Where you're applying, you got to apply, you got to have a harness and you got to have guardrails when you do something with AI. So you set up a harness to create some sort of standards, what's standard and what's going to be my variables in this. And then that way I do it the same every time. And when I iterate, I'm measuring when I change it. And then the second thing are those guardrails, both inputs and outputs. Yeah. And then changing those and improving them. So I think one of the things that's powerful is that ability to iterate quickly and learn. But to your point, if you don't have those guardrails, if you don't have the harness to where you're putting structure around it and you're doing that iterative learning, then to your point, there's a lot of room for mistake there.
Well, I also want to, I'm addressing that because you and I know, like larger organizations, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, have teams to do this.
Absolutely.
Right? Software development, coders, they have, security teams, all that. But mid-tier and lower, they might have an IT guy or two IT guys or maybe one security, one not, don't have the bandwidth to do it, and they're trying to be more efficient to keep up with security, but also use the tools available so they can be more efficient. So those are the ones I'm really speaking to, because the ones that have more team members and resources to be able to do it, they understand that. But the ones that are mid-sized and below are just trying to keep up.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. I'll tell you the other dynamic, even with the big folks, is, they got plenty of tokens and tokens are cheap to build right now. But once you build it, you have to maintain it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks are like, wow, I can build things, but this whole maintain the thing and keep the thing running and the care and feeding is a whole nother element that while we can build new cool tools really, really quickly, especially around great APIs like ours, you can build some really incredible front ends and systems now overnight. But your ability to maintain them and then maintain that drift over time, like mature systems have spent a lot of years getting that right. And I think that's one of the misnomers with AI was that SaaS companies were just going to struggle because everybody could build their own software.
Right.
But the reality is maintaining software and keeping it up to date and maintaining it with the quality that we all expect these days, now that we all have iPhones and Androids in our pocket, there's a low tolerance for error. And so I do think that, there's some, it's not all roses with even the big teams that are using AI to move fast, is they're running into their own challenges trying to maintain the things that they built.
Oh, 100%. Like I know for me, some of the application front ends that I built with customers, to your point, there is cycles where we have to do error checking and bugging and fixing and vulnerability management, all that to it. So 100% speed to market, 100% it's cut down, right? To maintain it going forward, still the same process, hasn't changed. Right. Now you can have some automation integration, have it doing some self-checking and reporting and all that, but you still got to check it and do that. It's not to the point. I've talked to a couple of weeks with other subject matter experts. AI is not taking jobs, right? AI is creating jobs, just different jobs. You might not be doing the same thing you were doing last week, but now you're doing something more due diligence when it comes to AI with your expertise and knowledge.
Well, especially in cybersecurity. I mean, like obviously the job market, I've got a lot of friends that, have struggled or gone through different times. And I'll tell you, it has created so many new opportunities because there's so much new attack surface.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the expanded attack surface there, now our team's consolidating and trying to get more efficient or being forced to be more efficient, even if they're struggling to do so. As you said, it's not just wave your AI wand and now all of a sudden my team of 10 can do it with 3. No, that team of 3 is going to burn out really fast. Trying to keep the interns happy, as they say.
100%. And I think that's the thing, the technology is always great. It's just how do you manage it going forward, especially in our field in security. It's evolution. It's always changing. It's always, adapting. So we're always having to stay on top of it. Now, one question I did have for you is like, how do advisories adapt infrastructure faster than defenders can respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to what you really said earlier about the fact that the attackers have no real guardrails, no real limitations. They certainly have budget constraints, in terms of what capabilities they can do. But nowadays, with a $20 cloud subscription, you can do quite a bit of damage.
Right.
And so the resources for an attacker and collective knowledge, right? You think about online communities after COVID. Kids grow up online these days. And so being able to get communities and share knowledge around techniques, share my GitHub, and now I've got a professional. We've seen government leaks of tools, GitHub repositories of intelligence tools that now as a young hacker, I can pull those tools down, and with AI, I don't have to know much about them to use them.
Right.
So that really makes it lowers the barrier to entry, obviously.
Right.
For the defender, we have to handle all the things that we did before, as you said. And then also we're expected to innovate at a rapid pace, right? To keep up. So it is, and that's in our personal lives as well as in our work lives. So I do think it's a challenge for humans right now.
Would you say it's increasing to the point where now we need to be better at collaborating?
100%. 100%. So, one of the things Team Cumry does is we host events. We host Underground Economy. I'm getting ready to go in a week and a half to France, Strasbourg, France, to the Council of Europe. We bring in around 700 people around the globe from law enforcement, the CTI community, and the defender community, really bringing everyone together to collaborate. It's a face-to-face opportunity for a week where we go through really real-time case studies and collaborate on actionable threat intelligence around what adversaries are doing, the techniques they're using, and ways that different defenders and teams are getting ahead of it. Mm-hmm. And then what we're doing is we're taking that and doing what we can to share that across the community. So we host, I want to say we host over 15 to 20 events a year, in person, internationally. I was in Sydney, Tokyo, a variety of Ireland last year. So really trying to get out and get in person. And if you are thinking of ways to collaborate, that's one of the best ways, is to get out to local events in your community, in your area, and find other folks that are doing the same thing you're doing to try to share knowledge.
I also think, to your point, I think more CISOs organizations need to have more war rooms, collaboration, just to have the intelligence of what's going on in the industry. What are they seeing? What are other companies doing to secure their infrastructure? What's kind of on their roadmap? They don't have to give it any intellectual property, but hey, like, we're hardening our firewalls this year. We're doing this. We're doing DLP. We're doing a whole AI push this year, like in policies and documentation and controls. Whatever that may be, I think we need to collaborate more on those, because then it starts to get a baseline across all organizations.
I think you're absolutely right. When we think about, collective defense, there's lots of, not to go political or anything like that, but I think when we think about putting our heads together and we're all fighting the same adversaries, the same problems, the same types of fraud, and to your point, being able to share techniques, and there's obviously legal challenges and liabilities, and we all have responsible disclosure policies where we work. But where we can share in TLP red environments across the community, Team Creamery's done that for 25 years, created space for folks to share in safe places to where there's an opportunity for our defenders to get an edge above the attackers. They're able to do this in plain sight. To your point, we have all sorts of challenges and red tape and bureaucracy that we have to fight with an arm behind our back, as you said earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Now, kind of looking at we're talking about like the threat intelligence, we're talking about threat actors, we're talking about the environment. What are some areas, like when we look at critical defense? Like if you were going to say, look, the things I've learned over this last year, would I need to protect? What would be the top 3 things?
Yeah, I'd say number 1 is your edge devices, understanding where you're putting devices and where where internet traffic goes in and out of your egress points. You can do all the monitoring internally that you want. And at some point, you're going to, to your point earlier, you just have to have a human let them in. Click a button and let them in, whether it's clicking on a link, open an email, open an attachment, or somebody calling a service desk and resetting a password. There's so many easy ways to trick a human, and that's not because we're dumb. It's because we're busy. We're exhausted. We're overwhelmed. And so I think realistically, if you get an idea of your edge devices and where you're vulnerable at the edge, being able to put eyes on that and then proactively understand who's touching those surfaces on a day-to-day basis, being able to baseline, normalize, understand that activity from the outside in. What's leaving the network? I think so many folks focus on defending, but they don't necessarily focus on what's leaving. And what's leaving right now is way more relevant than what's coming in a lot of ways.
Oh, 100%. Right? Because I think, to your point, when you have traffic going out, data exfiltration, anything along that line, people are not seeing that until there's actually an incident and or event, meaning all of a sudden your server's encrypted. Then they're like, oh my God, what happened? And then when you do your forensics investigation, you realize through the firewall logs and things like that, oh, did you know there was data going outside of the firewall at 2 a.m. till 6 a.m. every night for the last 2 months? And like, no one knew what happened. Like, so to your point, 100%, totally agree. You got to look at both.
From the edge device exploitation, I think the next stage is the supply chain, right? You mentioned it earlier. So obviously I put my own mask on. I'm hardened, I'm safe. You can't just then bury your head back in the sand. You then have to go, well, where's the next edge that I need to defend? And it's your supply chain edge. That includes the identity infrastructure on that supply chain. And a lot of cases you won't necessarily know. I know so many organizations where they're like, yeah, I've got 20,000 suppliers. Tell me how that scales, right? And so you really do have to then triage. You have to prioritize and say, okay, well, what are the most important ones that have access? And that becomes work. But you really do have to understand the supply chain, begin to monitor that, and understand the risks associated. When there's a breach and keys for a particular type of third-party application is exploited, and you have supply chain entities with those particular type of technologies, you have a heightened risk. And so those are the types of things that you have to start paying attention to and being aware of proactively.
Okay. And then what would you say is number 3?
Number 3, I would say the adversary. Pivoting back to, you're hardening yourself, you're hardening the supply chain, and really the last thing is begin to focus on the adversary. Who is it that's targeting your industry? Who are those sophisticated fraud rings that every day wake up, they play a little bit of video games, and then they turn around and they start figuring out how to exploit your infrastructure, whether it's your service desk or your soft points, finding those and figuring out how to exploit your entity or your organization. I've seen it over and over. Threat actors will, there is certainly the exploits of opportunity where it's spray and pray. But there's also the less sophisticated actors using AI, pick a particular vulnerable business or target. Hey, that's an easy target. I can target the business owner. I can send SMS to their cell phone. I can target their accounts payable. I can hit that. And now I can just start working my way around the business. And so really understand the adversary. So when that begins to happen, you don't treat it like a one-off. and then a one-off and a one-off, and you're at stage number 4 before you realize it was an entire campaign, and it's going to continue until you get your hands around it. I've seen that happen over and over.
Now, one thing I'd add, or a couple things I'd add to that great list too, I'd add, look at your service accounts, your privilege accounts as well, right? To add that, because anything that can be externally facing that has elevated privileges is potential for compromise. Software inventory. The one thing I recommend, and I don't know what you think about this, Will, software inventory, if you know what's in your environment, what's being run, if something is rogue or something that shouldn't be in your environment, it's easier to detect versus, I don't know what's on the desktops, the laptops, the endpoint protection. I don't know what's going on. I think it's
so on both of those, from an identity perspective, you're absolutely right. So being able to monitor the identity infrastructure, whether it's an IDP that you use in Okta or Entra or whatever IDP you use, obviously sometimes that'll be shared infrastructure, but knowing where your authentication points on is absolutely critical. And then to your point, the service accounts, being able to understand where those are. So understanding those critical supply chain points or access points, absolutely critical.
Yeah, and I think to your point, with that on top of the inventory, I've gone into companies where two sad things. One is they have duplicate software. So you're like, okay, you have an endpoint, you have 2 endpoint protections. What are they doing? You have 2 this, you have 2 that. Like, what are you doing with those ones? Was one not efficient enough? They're like, oh, we started with one, but then we got a license and we went with the other. Now they're both in there. And I'm like, do you know they might be conflicting? You might not be getting the same information. So you start trying to clean that up. But then you start looking at TeamViewer, RDP, and all these remote, like, which one do you use? Which one do you monitor? What do you mean?
That's right. And that goes hand in hand with that egress filtering. To your point, how do you know what's supposed to be in there and what's not supposed to be if you don't have the inventory of your software? That's exactly right. And then you can start baselining that and say, this is what normal looks like. And when I see something that doesn't look like normal, maybe we can't block all RMM tools for some reason, right? But at a minimum, when a new one shows up, you dang sure want to know about it, right?
Well, the thing is, as well as anyone, you can start hardening that around that you just don't have a blanket RDP. You have it going maybe through a VPN with MFA, and you've added layers of authentication versus, hey, I have RDP that's completely, publicly facing, then anyone can ping port 3389. Well, you and I know that's so unsecure. Threat actors will look at that as just basically an open door. They're like, okay, great, we found it. We're going to try just chip away at it.
That's one of our baseline playbooks is remote access tools. So, being able to take a daily, weekly hunt for any RDP access targeting your infrastructure, and just saying, look, from the outside, who's using RMM tools? We can see what we see, but where are there potential exposure that, maybe we just don't have understanding that there's an access point there.
100%. And I think to the point of that is, if you find it, is it secure? Like, is it just completely open and we can start getting to the login page and then we're there? Then you're like, okay, like you have a potential security risk right here. And I think, when you're looking at companies like yourself who work with organizations, to give them that pre-active, insight to their environment, it's so much better than versus, okay, we got hit. How'd they get in? Well, did you know you had this? No, well, we knew some of our support people use it. Well, that's how the threat actor got in. He found it as well. It was publicly facing, and then they chipped away at it and eventually got in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, like, are you seeing different types of attacks? And meaning, like, we have the phishing campaign, we have network intrusion, we have, people trying to get through vulnerabilities and the normal kind of, network devices, things like that. Are you seeing anything that's different?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest thing is just we're seeing the LLM usage. So, like everything from LLM distillation attacks where folks are trying to use LLM to really just crawl and pull anything that they can find. Right. You think about a crawler just crawling across your public infrastructure, and then when it hits something, it just keeps pulling on threads. You got pages that maybe you thought, well, it's not really out there. It's not really public, dangling DNS records off your DNS. all of those things are getting crawled and consumed on a daily basis. So if it's out there, it's getting consumed at some point.
Right.
And so I think that's really the dynamic that we're seeing, is that it's just exposing everything. And then the repertoire of capabilities that adversaries have at their disposal is just wide open,
Right.
as to what they can throw at those assets. I was talking to a team yesterday, and their model was that we just attack all the time.
Right.
As a defense company, we're going to attack all the time, and it's an interesting concept, but you got to assume that's already happening,
Right.
and so you might as well beat them to the punch. And so it's an interesting concept and model, but I think it makes sense.
I think so too. And I think the challenge right now is, to your point, I was talking to a colleague last week, and we were talking about threat actors had a methodology that if for every 9 months to 6 months, they would attack known vulnerabilities, because in the patch management with most organization, that was generally the patch window. Some companies were a little bit more faster, but between 6 months and 9 months, normally they could catch one, or in there's several companies that haven't patched that known vulnerability. And they knew it was be able to compromise. They have the CVEs and the threat intelligence on that. So they knew how to walk right in. I think the challenge right now we were talking about is they can go from historical CVEs and vulnerabilities to current ones and scan them all.
Yeah. No, no, to your point, the ability to enumerate the vulnerability library available, and walk that is trivial, right? It's been collapsed to zero.
Yeah. Right. And I think that's one of the challenges I'm hearing. I don't know if you're seeing that, is that so on the other side of organizations, their patch management now has to go like 48 hours. You had 6 months before. No, you have 48 hours before you start getting, at least see network traffic start getting pinged at the external environment, to see if that's actually a threat actor. The time frame has changed.
Oh, it has to change. When you think about 2011, I was a security architect and for a large international company, and we had a change advisory board. And my job every month was to read through Microsoft Patch Tuesday, Oracle patch notes, and then explain to 30 subsidiaries why they had to do their cap or why they had to do their changes. And to your point, every month was pulling teeth to get endpoints patched. Quarterly, we'd be lucky to get servers patched. It was probably 6 to 18 months. Can you imagine that in today's world? No. Right? Like, to your point, it needs to be 48 hours, which means that the infrastructure has to be built differently in order to support rapid releases, rapid updates. And so the applications that you're using in your architecture also have to be adaptable. Right. So when you go in to make technology selections, it's super critical that you think about that up front, agility.
I think to your point, and this is just my thought, you have to be more secure on your external, and then your internal environment you can now have in basically in sandboxes and different types of solutions that might not need to be patched as much, but anything external facing, you got to keep that lean so you can do that. And I think that's where, when you look at network designs, infrastructure topologies, things along that line, they have to think of it differently.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, the timeline from vulnerability disclosure to actual targeting and attack is near zero. So you're absolutely right. If we don't collapse that window, we don't stand much of a chance.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that the topology and how you're getting people to come in, the DMZ, the gateways, and all that you're having, have to be designed differently, have to be more secure, because like you said, if you have a gateway that has a customized application that can't be updated or configured on the fly and has to take time to do that, now you get back into, like we were talking about, that window of 90 days, 6 months to now remediate and patch that. Well, that's a honeypot for a threat actor to go after.
Yeah, it is. No, it just sits out there in the open. I think the other thing, when you think about that whole model, with the I've lost my train of thought there.
Again, it's just the attack surface, right? I think We have to be more strategic on implementation, because I think a lot of companies, when they did that, they want to have accessibility. I mean, some people have studied the CISSP, whatever. You have the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But as you're
Yep.
going that, most companies think about availability. 5 nines up, mobile device, globally accessed, like all this stuff. It's you can, if you're in China and Germany, you can access all this, and it's so convenient. But I think when we look at confidentiality and the integrity of the data, we now have to bring that back in. We now have to screen.
Oh
Okay, it
yeah.
doesn't have to be in the. It doesn't have to be on prem. You can still do in the cloud, but the way you put layers of security over top of it or in front of it to protect it, I think has to be more thought out.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but I think the tolerance for failure has gotten lower or gotten higher, I should say. I mean, now you see Claude, there's outages, there's cloud outages. A few years ago, a downtime or an outage would have been just such a big thing, but I think people are building so fast. We are more adaptable to, oh, something's down, Claude's down. Okay, let's all stop working for an hour. Like, Claude's down, let's go get some coffee and come back. But to your point, we also understand that disruption is because we're trying to keep up.
Right.
So I think that going back to that availability triangle, we're willing to let a little bit of availability go for that integrity, the confidentiality. And I guess I don't know which one it is when we talk about innovation. Where did innovation fall in the CIA triad? It's outside of it, right?
Probably be availability, right? Because again, you're trying to innovate, optimize, integrate solutions to make it more available.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's the trade-off. You're making it more available, but then there's risks with that availability at the same time, because it may not be as stable as you're rapidly developing.
100%. I think that's where that kind of like the scale is, right? You go one side or you go other, and there's kind of that middle in between, right? So we're trying to balance that out. But I think on a security conversation, I think it's as we become more fluent in technology, we have to be more confidential. We have to be more secure, right? Until the point where that keeps up. Because I know for myself, there's projects I've been working with, and I noticed, like even I saw it on a YouTube video where people were talking about like their secure keys and things like that. Or if you can go to GitHub and you can see hundreds of companies that Claude and or ChatGPT went through a development stage and needed that security key to get the API or something going, and it grabbed it and now it made it public. Well, there you go. There's your security's gone, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. The number of AI video calls where things are captured, the amount of data that's potentially being harvested right now. One of the big things when I was in private enterprise, they harped on the retention policies. In government, there wasn't much of a retention. You kind of keep things forever. There was policies, but in the private sector, it was very strict in terms of getting rid of old data that you didn't need for business value because of the legal risk and the liability. I think it's never been higher for that because you think about whether the data is encrypted now or not. In the future, it could be decrypted. So just looking at old data that you don't need around anymore, I'd put a lot of emphasis in getting rid of data you don't need, whether it's Slack channels or emails or old Google Drives. You mentioned the GitHub accounts, but any old data laying around really can be weaponized now or in the future.
Oh, 100%. And I think what people don't understand, smaller companies, they're integrating all their technology, Zoom, note-taking, whatever that may be, with their calendar and their drives and this, that. But they don't realize what actually that has access to.
No, the MCP, oh my goodness. It's so easy to connect your MCPs, and it's so productive, right? To quickly connect all your bank accounts and all your identities and all your Gmails and all your communication methodologies. At the same time, the risk is probably exponentially higher too.
It is, and I don't think they realize the data that it's capturing. It's the same with like I can put the equivalent as the same as social media when social media came out and Facebook and oh my God, I'm putting my pictures and I'm eating here. I'm going to the gym and I'm geolocating this and doing, and you're gonna go, hold on, time out. I can tell where you are, when you're at, what location, when you're on vacation. Like there's no personal security. Like I literally know every year this is your birthday, this is where you go on vacation. I know when you're going to be away. I know when you're going to do this. I can literally go and break into your house and stay there for a week because I know you're gone. Like that information you just publicize. Like it's not like I'm stalking you. I can just go watch your Facebook feed and go through it.
Yeah.
I don't think, I think, and I'm using that as equivalent to AI right now. I think it's the same way with companies, is because they want to integrate and they want to capture this. They want to automate this. They want to do that. And they're capturing all this data, but they don't realize, hold on, time out. What did we just provide to this outside company, this outside
Yep.
tool?
Yep. No, absolutely. But one of the most difficult projects I ever did in my career was data classification, and it was an attempt at a very large conglomerate company to do data classification across 30 subsidiaries, and it was an absolute travesty just trying to use spread. This was 15 years ago, so it was in spreadsheets. But your ability to classify data and inventory data and treat data the right way at the right level of security honestly has never been easier. Now, taking the time to go through and inventory the data, get it put into the right data storage location, the right level of encryption, and the right level of security, that takes time, takes
Right.
effort. But the tools for doing it and moving the data around, while there's risks with it, the power it holds to get you set up in a secure place is also incredible.
Yeah.
So to your point, there's trade-offs with it. It can either be weaponized against you or potentially used to get you in a good place.
Oh, 100%. Now, I know we have about like 6 minutes left. Anything you like to add? Any golden nuggets, tips?
I'd say that I love what you said earlier when we were talking about being able to collaborate in the community. One thing, Team Cumry, we're a mission-driven organization. We were founded to save and improve human lives. Rabbi Rob, our founder, instilled that in this business from the beginning, and we continue to, hold that true. And so, we do really, really strongly and passionately aim to educate the community, bring the community together, and foster the collaboration that you're referring to earlier. So if there are folks out there that are interested in getting connected or want to know more about threat intelligence, I would really, really encourage you to find Team Cumry, follow us, or reach out. We're absolutely happy to talk about threat intelligence, walk through what it is, what NetFlow data, what passive DNS, fingerprints, and what is external threat intelligence, because I do think it's sort of a scary unknown. I was fortunate enough to start my career at US CERT, where we had NetFlow data. But a lot of folks that work in internal security teams may not have ever been exposed to that. So anyway, I would just put out there that, Team Cumry is, again, a mission-driven organization that's here to educate, help defenders all around the globe do their job better. And whatever we can do to promote that, we'd love to do that.
That's awesome. So now, anyone watching this or listening, you can connect with Will Baxter at linkedin.com/in/Will-Baxter. And then he has a -1B3500611. You can watch the video on YouTube. You can get that. And then if you want to go check out the website, it's Team Cumry. It's team-cymru.com. Come out and check them out. I mean, you guys have a lot of great information. I was checking out the website, when we first got it connected. A lot of great information there. Like you said, the threat intelligence, I highly recommend people go out and check it out.
I appreciate it, Brandon, and super grateful for you having me on and the opportunity to talk today. I just really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so much, yeah. And we'll catch up after. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Wow, what a great episode. There was a lot of great tidbits there, from threat intelligence to what's going on in the environment to indicators of compromise. I mean, you name it. There's a lot of things that I'd recommend you go back and watch the episode and listen to all the things that Will's been talking about, because I think right now when it comes to the industry and things are changing, it's those things we're connecting with companies like Will's company, right? To be able to get the threat intelligence, the information, the expertise, and being able to look at implementation and strategizing with experts that are doing it day in and day out, I think it's key to be able to do that. So don't forget, software is hackable, being connected is vulnerable. I'll see you next Daily Cyber.